Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live-streamed pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood, and this week I have with me not Julie Tenner, but I have Tara Arcobelli. Welcome, Tara.
Thank you, Bridget. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I have Tara here because we are talking all things liberating ourselves from overwhelm and resentment in our home. And if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, or if you're in Reimagining Motherhood, you will know Tara because we have done some amazing work with her over the years now on who we are in our homes and how our homes can support us, and also the ways in which our homes reveal our own imprints that we're often unconscious of. So we're going to get into that conversation. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Tara, and then we're going to dive right in. So Tara Arcobelli is the Household Advisor, a holistic organisational and household behavioural change expert. Tara is drawn to homes, spaces, and the environment that people live in. Each day she works to better understand herself, her relationships, her home and spaces. Tara helps clients do the same. Tara supports women to cultivate an environment that nourishes their soul by unpacking their household imprint, that is, their generational patterns, beliefs, habits and behaviours. Tara's mission is to lead this generation of mothers out from under the weight of their homes. And that last line, I am just like, wow. Because we carry so much weight.
We do, so much. It's unbelievable.
So can you share, for those who perhaps aren't familiar with your story, how this work has come to be your life's work? And I say life's work, and people might go, organisation or household organisation, how can that be someone's life's work? But knowing you the way I do, I see without a doubt that it is, and that what I've seen you unravel through the story of your lineage is just phenomenal. And I think I just want to give reverence to that, because so often we sideline the domestic and make it unimportant, and yet it is so fundamental to our sense of self and how we function in our world, and how supported or unsupported we feel going out into the world and being in a relationship with our family.
100%. Thank you. Yes, it has. Like I realised, I think just recently actually, that it has been something that I've been doing since I was young, probably ever since I was born, to be honest. And it's been so innate to me that sometimes it's actually even been hard for me to actually be able to see and articulate. But I've always been very drawn to the home, always been very drawn to sort of motherhood and parenting as well. But I was born with a very sensitive nervous system, and I also have a highly sensitive personality type, which just means that I feel everything. Like I literally feel everything. I see so much, and I see just so much of what happens under the surface. And I think that's been just such a wonderful training ground for me throughout my life, in the way that I've observed my environment and had to work with my nervous system in order to sort of soothe it and calm it and to function in this world. And as part of that, it's given me a deep desire to better understand myself and why I do what I do, because you always say like behavior is so purposeful. Like there's a reason why we do what we do. And I think for a long time there were parts of me that I sort of felt were a bit awkward or a bit more shameful or things like that, but that have actually been a gift, because they've taught me so much, and they've helped me navigate this world in just a whole new way, I guess. And I think I've said this before, I think on the podcast, but I grew up in a home where not a lot was said, but I felt like I could just always feel a lot of sort of the undertones of that, which just meant that I've just had to navigate life and the world in a certain way, and lots of sort of different life events as I've gone along the path as well have even accelerated that, and I love to learn I think as well. And I lost my beautiful mother 16 years ago, and she was, I guess, loved organising, was very well ordered. Both my parents, in actual fact, were both very well organised, but she was, I guess, the epitome of the perfect housewife, the perfect mother, the perfect sister, the perfect friend. And so I like, that's my imprint that I come with, and I observed her in the home. But then when we lost her so suddenly, I inherited like an environment and a household and a dynamic and a brother and a father, and like then it was sort of expected that, because she was sort of like the matriarch of the family, like she was the glue that kind of kept everyone and everything together. And then when she was not there and the rug sort of on my life was pulled out from under me, I was like, wow, like I just realized that, so not the burden, but the weight of the silent load and the work that she did so beautifully and so effortlessly in the home. But I saw the toll that ultimately that then took on her, because we're conditioned to believe to give everything and leave nothing for self. And I don't remember her ever resting. I don't really remember her ever being sick or ever really taking a break. Like if somebody needed something, or that something had to be done at home and the family needed something, she was always there. And I think that, so like, she didn't leave enough then for herself. And then by the time she realised that she wasn't 100%, then it was a advanced stage 4 cancer diagnosis, and there was nothing that could be done. So I watched, I guess, the weight of the expectation that society puts on us have on her. And I also realised, like, I've learned obviously a lot having two very organised parents, but I think that first to understand me and understand where I was, like where I'd come from and where I was going, whether I wanted to go down that same path, or whether I at that point wanted to be like, okay, I'm going to keep the bits here that work and serve me that I really like, and then I'm going to start to challenge and question and change and learn. Like I just have a thirst for learning. So that when that happened, like I was then working in the corporate world, but to sort of better understand it. But then when I had my son quite a few years later after that, and went into the home full time, everything that I'd done throughout my life, like every department, every work colleague that I probably ever worked with, that I had ordered and organised, and I just had a beautiful way of going into an environment, working out what the dynamics were, like what that sort of soup was, and then to sort of remove those areas that were kind of stuck and stagnant, and creating that like overwhelm and resentment, and getting everything flowing again. And as I said, did that sort of from a corporate perspective. But then when I had my son, I was like, I'm home. Like I'm home. Like I just feel like I've come home, because that does, like when people said, oh, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I was always like, I want to be a mother. Like babies and little children, and were always drawn to me. Like I was always the one saying, Mum, have more children, and can I hold that baby, and can I babysit? And then when I went into the home and then have my children, and then just, I guess, learning from them as well, and having had that sensitive nervous system and personality type, then learning what it was like for my husband. So then obviously integrating like my husband into the dynamic for the two of us, and then integrating my children and a dog, and kind of all the moving parts. But just every time I guess life got really hard, like I've had a few things that have knocked me down pretty hard, but then I've kind of picked myself back up and been like, well, what's the lesson here? Like, what am I actually not seeing? Like, I had recurrent miscarriage. I had 3 back-to-back miscarriages between my children, and I wasn't sure that I'd be able to have a second child. And I remember sitting in the doctor's office and he said to me, you've had a live birth before, so just keep going. Just keep trying. Like, one will stick eventually. And I said to him, like, I had postnatal depression when I had my son, and now you're telling me just get pregnant because it's relative. I was lucky. It was relatively easy for me to get pregnant, but I didn't know if it would stick. So you're just telling me to keep doing, like, my mental health, like, is suffering. And I guess a massive part of this is that in order for my mental health to be really good, my nervous system has to be feeling really soothed and sort of on point. And my environment has a massive, massive impact. And most of it is stuff that I didn't see, that I couldn't see. And so I said to him in that doctor's office, like, what am I not seeing here? Like, what's going on? And that was a deep dive into all the products in our home. We took all the products out. We did all the food, did all the elimination, all the gaps, everything that, like, is a stimulant or could be having an impact on how we were feeling, I then address. So, yeah, kind of every step of the way. And then I guess locked, like, I'm in Melbourne. So we've spent the better part of the last 2 years locked in our homes, which meant when I started my business, I went out and into homes and got to see what was happening, because we're not taught in school how to run a home. Like, we learn it from our parents and our caregivers. And we don't live in a lot of homes generally. Like, we're not in 50 or 60. So we might have a few childhood homes, we might have a few partners, a few housemates, things like that. But we're not seeing, like, I was so surprised at the breadth of what I was seeing when I actually then went out into the homes and thinking, oh my goodness, like, even having married an Italian, like, I married a European who just comes with a totally different way of seeing the world. And sometimes, like, I will sit there and I'll look at him and I'll think, how did he, like, what made him think to do it that way? And then I'll check myself and be like, well, why wouldn't you? But it just, like,
and that self-reflection, well, what made me do it the way I do it?
That's right. And then so I went out and I saw a lot of that, and then we were locked in our homes, like, in that intensity that we'd never experienced before. And the first lot of lockdowns, I think I said to you before, I feel like I did it quite well. Like, I felt pretty confident. I quite enjoyed it. The second lot, I think because I knew what I was heading into, was just a whole new ball game, and I just had to work harder because I just noticed I was hitting up against myself, like, kind of over and over and over again. So, like, we're all healing. Like, I like to think we're all healing our relationship with our homes and with ourselves, and they're very, very interlinked. So that was a beautiful opportunity too for me to go in and be like, oh, that's a
really good point. You've said a couple of things that I want to come back to, but that point there, through our home, we also learn our relationship to ourselves, because if you imagine, or we all know this, we form our personality based on how we perceive others see us. So much of the challenge perhaps that we experience as children would be in relation to how we are in the home, right? Like, our mothers are exhausted or stressed and we spill something and they react, or we want something from them and they're busy and they react. And so we all have these nervous systems that are wired in certain ways in relationship to aspects of the home, but that we don't get to see until we see it play out with our own children, or we see ourselves, as you're saying with your husband, in comparison to others. And it's through that comparison that we come to know ourselves better.
100%. Absolutely. And the more...
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the more sort of personalities then that you bring into your environment as well, then the more that soup, like, it's almost like a soup that's continually changing. And then too, depending on what's happening on the external, like, so even outside of our homes, so whether it be a pandemic, lockdowns, floods, like what's happening on the other side of the world, like, there's so much.
It also changes how we relate to things around us, because we then see things around us in a different way. Like, we might watch the news and then be overcome with our privilege. And so then we see our home differently and ourselves in our home differently. What I love about the lens that you have and the way that you work so intuitively is that it goes, like you said, this, getting under the surface. It exactly is that, because we have like a more consumer culture around organization that says, go to like the storage shop and like get the extra storage things, or get the cleaner to clean so it's not as stressful for you. But the cleaner is still responding to the environment which you're creating. And, I've felt this in the past too. Sometimes when I've had a cleaner, it's like, I have to clean for the cleaner.
I hear that a lot.
So whichever way you look at it, whether you get additional help or you're looking for that perfect storage item to take care of your problem, you still can't get away from the fact that it's you and how you are in your environment that sets up how you feel in that. 100%. And like no amount of extra cleaning or extra storage items can allow us to escape from that reality. And I'm sure everyone listening has a certain area of their home perhaps that is their angst point, or their place where they shame spiral, or the place where they just can't seem to tidy or organize. And you would see that, as I understand it, as really insightful and purposeful and something to open up and explore about what it means for you, not just something to fix. Am I right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's about, I guess I always think too that your home is like tells the story of you. And as you said, there's no escaping you. And I think I really learned that in lockdown. Like, it doesn't really matter what else kind of you bring in, or like I could come in and I could order and organize your entire home and you could have a cleaner all of the time, but nothing actually is going to change in your home until you're addressing the interactions. So that relationship, that co-creation and what you're kind of bringing to that relationship, I guess. And lots of cleaners say that to me all the time. I would have more time to do the role that I'm there to do, which is cleaning, if the spaces were more ordered and organised as well, because they feel like most of the time they spend is on moving things and shifting things and, like going around rather than being able to come in to do the job that they're actually there to do. But, yeah, I think of the home very differently in that. And I often say to my clients, like, to imagine it, like imagine walking up to your home and like there being no garden and no facade, like it's just white, like it's a completely white blank canvas and it's just you. And then you walk through and you walk in and you walk into your living space, or the sort of the biggest space in your home, and you turn around and there's not one single item in there. There's nothing. The only thing that's in there is you. And it's you. So the engine room of our homes is us, and it's everything within that we bring with us. So all those generational patterns that come, so that what I like to call a household imprint, so what you kind of learned in your childhood home, aspects of what you bring into your home as an adult, all those beliefs that are in your subconscious, all those habits, all those decision-making processes, and your values, what's meaningful to you, the way your brain works, the way your nervous system is wired. Like there's just so much, but we don't see it. Because unless you're actually bringing that awareness and getting curious about it, we're not looking, because it's not so much a physical attribute. And I guess why I've had to notice it is because I get such a strong reaction. Like I'm so my sensitivity that people, like I've my whole life been labelled, you're just oversensitive. Well, it serves a purpose. So it's the feedback. It's telling me. So it's almost like I'm a sensitivity barometer, or like even like an almost to a point overwhelm, because I can walk into a space and as soon as I'm getting that nervous system feedback, then I know that my brain is processing too much, because our brains have to process everything that's in the space. So I can get a really good read, I guess, on the silent interactions that are happening within that dynamic. And I think you get away with it too for a while if it's just you and you're living on your own. But the minute then you bring in, the first step then is you bring in the partner or someone else to live with. And so then you've got two different imprints, you've got two different perspectives, you've got two totally, and as I said, my husband's Italian, we couldn't be more different, which I think is just the biggest blessing ever, because he's opened my eyes, and so has my beautiful mother-in-law, just to a whole different way of seeing the world. And then you bring in like your children, which we say, what do we say? We birth our repressed parts, and then we bring in animals, and like it's wonderful, but like that's a lot. Like that's a lot without like before we even start dealing with like our home is like we're having a relationship with our home, so where it has its own needs of like in and of itself, plus all the responsibilities that come with life and motherhood and children and things. Like there's lots of different layers, but I feel like a lot of the time we're just looking kind of at the surface, and we're looking for a quick kind of like band-aid. If I do this, that'll just be the quick fix. But it's in the long run, like it actually takes longer if you keep kind of band-aiding it to just be like, well, what's going on here? And if you're hitting up like whatever you're hitting up against in your home, I feel like is like your next evolution of growth. Like it's like literally putting its hand up and waving to you. I'm over here. Like this is where I'm having trouble with my decision making. This is where I'm procrastinating. And this is probably like reflective of a part of my life that I need to empower, because it's not empowered. And then when we're not empowered in our homes, we become reactive. So we just live in
other thing to other stimulus.
Yeah, like it's almost like this cycle that we actually can't break. And we're also living in a time that's unprecedented, like in terms of technology and stimulants, and we can have whatever we want kind of almost whenever we want, and we're expected to be going and going and going and going and going all the time. And a lot of it's having a huge impact that we're not aware of. And when you're in that cycle, it's actually really, really hard to step back. Like I just say, instead of kind of being sort of stuck in that reactivity, it's about stepping back and becoming an active participant in your home, like stepping back and being just like, oh, whoa, like just for a minute, let's stop. Like what is it? Like what is a non-negotiable here? Like I just think we've gotten really kind of stuck under so much sort of obligation and conditioning and responsibility, and we just like can't even get our heads above water. And then it's just that constant just hitting the same things, and then it's resentment and overwhelm. And then like I just say to my clients, if you're complaining about it, then you need to address it. Like that is the first sign. Like if you do nothing else but for the next couple of days or the next week, watch what you're complaining about and notice those loops that are going over and over and over. Like that's just a waste. Like we just, the
amount of brain noise that creates. As you're talking, I was thinking about like the different iterations of work I've done on myself in the home. And I remember like at uni, I would procrastinate clean, like procrastinate by cleaning. And even like when I was pregnant with, I think it might have been Pearl, and my husband and I like organised like these massage therapists to come before. We'd had this beautiful night, just two of us. Both of us ended up spending ages like procrastinating cleaning, like as a way to like psych ourselves up for the level of intimacy that we're going into, because it felt really big. And so this is where I like to play devil's advocate with myself and others around what are you getting out of the burden right now? Because the burden and the weight of it can also be a really insidious way to protect yourself from vulnerability. It can be a way to protect yourself from your next level of growth. Like, because if your house was suddenly all ordered and organized and everything had a place and everybody else contributed, then what would that mean for who you would like be called to become? Whereas there's infinite numbers of ways to hide in motherhood or hide, our own things that we feel shameful about in the dynamics that we live in, rather than taking ownership of them. And I mean, I don't say this to like add further weight to say the mother with the newborn or the mother completely on edge with bigger problems and bigger stresses, but where you notice that your patterns in the home are, potentially allowing you to avoid other things, it's just interesting to look at.
Oh, 100%. And interest, like people would say, oh, but surely that wouldn't be something that you'd have to check yourself on because you're so ordered and organised. Well, it is, because it's in a different form. So I find myself like it's innate, like it's second nature. It's my autopilot, because I say most of the things that we do in our home we're doing on autopilot. So that's my autopilot, and it's very soothing for my nervous system to clean and order and things. And also, in fairness to that, ordering and sort of cleaning allows our brain time to process as well. So it can be nice downtime. So that can be a nice balance. But I just notice when I'm avoiding something, or I'm not wanting to face the emotions of something I should be kind of dealing with, my first thing to do, I'll notice myself. It's almost like an out-of-body experience, starting to order and organise and clean and things like that. And this year, because my daughter started prep, like I've had to really check myself and really become accountable to the amount of time that I spend even hiding behind my home. Oh no, I can't do that. I can't have any needs of, because again, my mother like put everyone else first. I can't have any other needs of my own, because I've got to make sure that dinner's ready, and I've got to make sure that this is clean. And then what I guess I also learned this year too was that no matter what, like it doesn't end. Our list of responsibilities kind of never ends. It will never be.
You never get to the bottom of the list.
You never get there. And it's a bit like society. It's a bit like even like appearance. Like there will always be something about us that we could pick on, that we could spend time getting lost in and trying to fix. And our homes are kind of the same thing. And like you were saying that about the massage, it's often, I think, like if people ever want to come over and things like that, it's just that compulsion to make sure that everything is super clean, or that, and like my dad came over the other day and I just was like, no, I'm not doing that. Like there's nothing
as you're talking, it totally reminded me of a quote in Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Esses, and she says, I've seen women insist on cleaning everything in the house before they could sit down to write. And, it's a funny thing about house cleaning. It never comes to an end. Perfect way to stop a woman. A woman must be careful not to allow over-responsibility or over-respectability to seal her necessary creative rests, riffs and raptures. She simply must put her foot down and say no to half of what she believes she should be doing. Art is not meant to be created in stolen moments only.
Yeah, and it's absolutely.
I need to read that every day.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that sort of changed the way that I saw the home, because it stopped being like, it will never be clean enough, it will never be perfect enough, it will never be ordered enough, it will never be kind of beautiful enough. So, and the only reason like that I'm worried about that is because then I'm trying to stop the judgment, and I'm worried about what other people are saying. And then I'm thinking, well, firstly, they're not living in my house. So that, like, obviously I don't want them to be thinking terrible things about me or anything like that. But at the end of the day, what matters is what makes you, like you or I, or so for me, what makes me feel good in my home. And like when my dad was coming over, I just thought, this is not serving, like this is taking energy away. Like, so I just have to draw a line in the sand to be saying, I need to identify in my home what serves my mental health, what serves my nervous system, what makes me feel good, okay? And I'm very aware of that. Like if I walk into a space in my home and my nervous system starts pinging, or I'm feeling that resentment or overwhelm, that's feedback that my space is not where I need it to be thriving myself. Parking, so if I'm thriving and then all the members of my family are thriving within that dynamic, do you know what I mean? They're the non-negotiables that I need to be on top of. And I guess the more I've observed myself and more I've observed my family, the better I've got at knowing what that is. And then the rest, like if I get a little bit extra time, then, if I can clean the windows, great. or if I like just those little extra things.
It sounds like a really integrated way of living rather than like a performative way. Like, you know, that whole quick, we've got to clean, someone's coming, versus like checking in day by day, or, you know, like hour by hour sometimes, of like, how am I feeling in this space right now? And then the next layer is, who am I getting annoyed at right now? Right, because what we then tend to do is project onto someone else in the family for like not picking up their stuff or not respecting us, or, you know, whatever that is. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about that, on how because what we naturally do as humans is we, you know, our values shift and change, and as we have a new set of values, we then start to think everybody else should have the same set of values as us. So great, I'm going to order the house, or I'm going to do this thing, and everyone else needs to care about this too. And all that happens is we get hurt by our own expectations. So how do you suggest that women work with the other people in their home in a collaborative way to like get the space to a place that feels nourishing?
Yeah, well, I think it's about learning, like you talk a lot about values. I think a good understanding of what is most meaningful to you is a great point, but then applying that to the other members of your family and then working within that dynamic, because my daughter has been a beautiful example of that. Isn't as ordered and organised, is creative, isn't as just as not interested in the order and organisation in the same way that my son is. And for a little while, there were really big edges on that for me. And I just noticed that anytime I'm walking around the house, or anytime that I just get that feedback in my nervous system, whether it be from a space or from someone in that space, as soon as I get that gut reaction to throw it out, I'm like, okay, stop. This is about me. So this is about me trying to project that out onto someone else. And I say it to my children all the time, like, what's going on for you that's making you want to behave in that way? And then addressing that and then working collaboratively with them. So my daughter is very, very creative, and that makes her thrive, and that fosters just everything. But a really chaotic environment for me with a lot of stuff means that my brain has to, well, everyone's does, but mine has to, that processing of my brain then has a negative impact on my nervous system. So I can't relax, I can't be calm, and then I'm more likely to be like flying off the handle at her because of that. So I've then worked with her collaboratively, like, to me, to be like, okay, so drop your expectations. How can we find a happy medium? So I started to talk to her with some of my principles, like, let's give everything a home. So lots of those like sort of big principles that I have, make a decision about it, like just sort of stepping her through some of the basics, and then having her take responsibility at the end of the day or before she goes to bed, or if she's brought a whole lot of stuff into our bedroom, I'm just saying it doesn't live there. Like, that's not its home. It doesn't feel good for me. I'm happy for you to do that, but you also need to be respectful, and we all live in this dynamic together, which is exactly what I say to my son. Like, I think he said the other day, but it's your home. Like, isn't it your responsibility to look after all of it? And my husband's like, no, because we're a team. Like, we're a team helping each other. We all have different strengths. We all have different values. We all function differently. But if we're looking at the home as a whole, we all bring a different like strength to that. And it's just working within each other's strengths and then working out like what is setting everyone kind of off. And that will change like as you transition. Like, as I said, my daughter started prep this year. Like, transitions will mean that the home will have to ebb and flow and change depending on what's happening. But it's just, I don't know, better understanding yourself and then better understanding everyone that's in that environment, and then what's triggering, like what are those stimulants and what are those things because that will be different for different people, and then addressing kind of those. Like, for me, I guess sort of the big ones are sleep and food, two big things that set me off, and a lot of stuff in my spaces. And then sometimes even if I used to have this bit of a vacuuming compulsion. I would almost say like I had to be vacuumed all the time. It doesn't have to be, but the second that my eye starts seeing a few things on the floor and that loop starts going, I'm like, no, okay, that's feedback and it's going to make me feel better. Like, so it's not about, you're right, it's not performative. It's not about it has to look a certain way. My thought is I want to create an environment that works for me, that has us thriving, and that will look different for everyone. Like there is no one size fits all. It will be completely different, but it takes a bit of time to work with and observe and talk to your children. Like I've talked to my children so much about it. Like they will call me out on things. Oh, well, you would tell me to do that. So why are you not doing it? Or like my husband will say, oh, well, if a client was, he's like, you're complaining about that. If a client was complaining about it, you'd say them to tell them to do something about it. So just kind of all working together and checking each other as you go along. But yeah, it's fascinating. Like you just learn so much about yourself. Like I say, our home is like our greatest training ground. Like everything that you ever needed to know about you is right there, like laid out in front of you, like in like your decision-making processes, what you value, the way you see the world, like your lens, and then you bring in all these other aspects with different lenses, which is almost like, oh, so yeah, I guess you can either be reactive and hit up against it, or you can choose to sit there and be like, well, what am I not seeing here? Because all behaviour is purposeful. So my kids are doing this is happening in my dynamic or my environment because it's trying to teach me something. So like, what do I need to address? Like, what's it saying that needs to be looked at right now? And it's not like, it's not easy. Like I have to do this work as well, like every day. And sometimes I'm just like, oh, come on. Like, and probably because I do so much of it, like it's probably even more sensitive. I'm like, oh, we just have a break this week. Oh, I don't want to have to.
Yeah, I don't want to have to be conscious.
No.
Right.
This podcast is brought to you by Tantric 101 Trust, which is a 5-lesson free course with me for 2 weeks only. It's free. And if you are wanting to reestablish, rebuild, reconnect, and create new trust within yourself, your body, your relationship, and your sexuality, then it's a fantastic place for you to start. You can find out more at julietenner.love.
And Flow, Mind, Body Mothering, which is really for you if you are feeling called for more support, more structure, more guidance gently from me on how to get past the overfunctioning, which leads you to resentment and disconnection and overwhelm in your mothering. And on the other side, find some more spaciousness. You can find out more about that at bridgetwood.life. It's funny because a couple of years ago when we first did Liberate, you came into my home and you went into Julie's home and we did like a video actually, which we streamed into Reimagining Motherhood each, which shows like the process of what, like we sped it up, but it shows the process and just the density for like me, like when you went into my office. And I'm laughing because I'm thinking it's the same problem still. Like I have these collections of books in all these piles, like in my house, and I have these collections of like notes. And it's like, yeah, that's looking to be ordered and organized and structured in some way. But no, I just let that continue to pile up. And that is purposeful for me, right? Like, what am I getting out of not bringing order and structure and a place for those things? Well, I get to deny like my knowledge because it's not somewhere I can easily see it, right? It's like dispersed, it's unstructured. And I just find that really interesting to lean into because I'm paying a lot of attention at the moment. I'm sort of changing some behaviours around the house and we've just put like a skylight in our bathroom and we've finally got stools at our big bench, which we've, like we renovated like 6 years ago. And it's turned this space into all of a sudden an amazingly functional space. But what it requires of us is that, things have a home now because there can't be the collection of things that there were there in the past. And so when you have that new commitment, it then helps you see your behaviours more clearly. But I've just been so humbled by the way that we have such a selective bias. Like the brain just doesn't see stuff until it finally sees it. And you're like, how could I live like that for so long? Or how could I not see that? And it's because we can't see everything. It's because we're constantly filtering. And I think that's where we can bring more softness to those in our family who just don't see the thing that we keep seeing in them, or that they do or don't do, because that they've actually just, it's like they haven't even computed it.
And it's almost, and it's so painful. Like sometimes it's like, oh, this is just horrible. But because I guess I've been doing it for so long, I've changed. Like I as soon as I get that anger or that trigger, it's that training of the brain to be like, oh no, stop, there's something for me to learn. Like it's just trying to broaden my lens. Like it's just trying to open my eyes to something that I've not seen before. So it's actually there to help me, even though it feels horribly painful. And because our brains don't ever want to change, like they just want to keep doing the same thing we've always done.
Or they'll do something in reaction. Like, you were talking a little bit earlier about the imprint and what we come with. And so my parents, they would clean as a way to not meet the conflict, or to not have the conversations, or allow space for the feelings, in my perception. Like that's certainly what the felt sense that I got. And so for the first couple of years of when I had like 2 children particularly, I would over and again all the time choose my children's feelings over cleaning. And it was almost like this unconscious way of trying to reconcile what I felt were unmet needs in me. But then what then happened was the house then felt like that was a burden on me. So I was almost trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater, I can see in hindsight, by just like not being so concerned about that and being oriented to the children and like the feelings in the home, not recognizing that actually the space and my lack of attention to how the space functioned was also co-creating the feelings. Right?
Yeah, no, 100%.
I think with my 3rd child and with, the work we've done over the years, it's helped me come to this like better place of kind of equanimity around it, to kind of see why my parents kind of like coped that way, and also the part of me that actually really desires that too, and does that in some ways, like, perpetuates that same kind of imprint. But also have the flexibility that if the space isn't the way that I want it, I can still be okay, like that I don't need it, just to kind of like to practice that non-attachment to the way things have to be while still improving your baseline, I suppose.
Yeah, 100%. So I think it's about balancing it out. And in order to do that, we need to bring more awareness to what actually kind of happening, like what's happening in that autopilot and what we've brought with us. So just that, I guess, being able to reconcile and be like, okay, so this is what I've brought with me. This is what my imprint was. This is kind of what I learned. That's how I sort of digested it. And as a result of that, this is how I behave. And then doing almost like like writing it all out sometimes, like even just an audit, whether it's a house audit or a behavioural audit, and just being like, okay, so this has served me beautifully. It feels good. It's a great, like it works really well. It works for my family. I'm going to keep that. But here are these areas that are not working for me, that I've brought with me, that aren't serving me, that I'm hitting up against, like might have worked for me in the past, but is making everything, like it's just making life harder than it needs to be. And then just really being like, right, firstly, is this a non-negotiable? Like, can we live without this? And if we can, then maybe it's a discussion about letting it go. But if it's not, how can we set up an environment and a structures and processes and things like that? And it's not even really being so much about organised as such. It's having an awareness of what you do and why you do it, so you can change it. Because what you aren't aware of, you can't, and what you can't see, you can't change. So in essence, it's you hitting up against you in your home. Like we're hitting up against ourselves. So we just kind of need to get out of our own ways. And like I've learned, so like the more I've then like created space for me in my home and gotten really real about where my time's going and what crutch, like where I'm hiding and things like that, the more I've learned about myself, the more I've been able to challenge and let that go. Like, and I just am constantly saying to myself, like, does this need to be done? Like, what benefit am I getting from this? And did that serve me 3 years ago? Well, it might have served me 3 years ago. But this is where I want life to go. And ultimately, I want our life to be more efficient and to be easier so we have more time as a family. Like, you can't get your time back. Like, I just always think you can't buy time. You can't get it. Like, once it's gone, it's gone. So just really doing an order and a check of where that time is going. And sometimes, like, then too, if I'm doing something and I'm really resentful of it, then there's things obviously that need to get done. I'm not saying like just stop doing all of it, but you need to find that happy medium as well and get to that place where you're doing it authentically rather than feeling like you have to do it because someone else, like a should. So it's just eliminating what needs to be done, what is an actual requirement or genuine need of my home over the shoulds that came as a result of my imprint or came as a result of the societal conditioning or other people in your life telling you, because then you'll also have people in your life saying, well, you should be doing that. And often I think as women, like if it's a parental figure or someone that we really value their opinion and they say something to us, sometimes we can really just internalize that. And I internalized a lot of that. Like, I need to change that behavior because it's like there's something wrong with me, like it's my fault. Whereas now it's more of I've got a bit more boundary, I guess, in my energy and my time to really hit that, like to bat that back and be saying to someone, really? Is that my responsibility? Is it? Like, why do you believe? Like, and then having conversations, like if my son or my daughter or my husband says something to me and saying to them, like, is it my responsibility? Should I be, like, I don't know, whose responsibility is it and why do we believe that? So it's just that kind of constant awareness, curiosity, and asking good questions to peel back the layers to really work out what's driving, because it's always that behavior that's underlying, like, and as I said, all behavior is purposeful. So why are you doing it? If it's not benefiting you, then what's another way that you can do it? But yeah, sometimes it's also hard to see it in yourself. So the beauty of having other members of the family and even animals, like, it's so funny, like there's things that my dog will do that will drive me absolutely bananas, and I'll just be like, but he's a dog, like what like what
but I also think from an energetic point of view, this is going to sound a bit out there, but I also do think animals will take on the responsibility of expressing dynamics too. So if you're like so obsessed with cleanliness and order and like structure and you push that down, like to say, like that becomes your way of having to be, then the animal will come in and shit all over the floor or something. Like there's going to be some kind of like rebalancing that's occurring.
Yeah, and I think with our dog in particular, and it's interesting, I've noticed that maybe he's getting older, but he would bark. Like, he's a beautiful dog, like has always been a very easygoing dog, but he would bark a lot, and particularly like not so much when anyone else was here. If I was ever at home by myself, or if I had to do something like a meeting or something or something that was important to me, or I wanted to have a nap, he would bark. And for years it drove me crazy, and I look back on that and I just laugh, and I think, well, because he was kind of expressing that voice that I had.
Did you like feel guilty, like that you weren't allowed to? Like, were you allowed to rest?
And well, yeah, and that, yeah, well, there you go. That was probably part of it too. But I've noticed that lesson a lot. Like, the stronger I've kind of gotten, the more aligned. But yeah, and that's right. And the more at peace, because also I watched a mother that just kept, like, you have to push. Like, I grew up with that mentality, no pain, no gain. And I just stop and I think, like, and even when I'm around the house and I go to throw, like, there'll be a couple of one-liners and I'll go to throw out, and I just think to myself, just stop, like, think about and unpack what you're saying, because then, like, my children are internalizing what I'm saying as well. Like, hold on a minute, like, no pain. Yeah, so just being really careful about that. But yeah, that's right. Like, I could never, ever have she could never have downtime unless everything was perfectly clean and ordered, and everyone's needs were met. And then she could have, and look, she definitely had, like, she loved her tennis, so she did make some space for that. But I have no doubt that there were other things that she probably also wanted to make more space for. But yeah, and then, as I said, like, the more layers, and then particularly in those early years with children that, you know, that are on you all of the time, that are requiring more of you than you've ever. And that was a huge wake-up call for me, because being type A, going into motherhood, like, again, like that setup and that belief as women, we should know how to mother, we should, you know, it should come naturally, we should know exactly how to breastfeed, like all those things that everyone...
You kind of take a professional attitude to it, like you move out of one profession and one, you know, like track of perfection into a new one. Which I did too, right? Like, you know, it's a research project and I am going to research this to the nth degree.
Oh, no.
What's helped me a lot looking at the way that you work, and we're going to do a bit of this in Reimagining Motherhood coming up, because I'm really thrilled that you're going to be taking us through another Liberate, has been workflows. Like the workflow for my children on when they get home from school, for example. And we have a school cupboard, which I got the idea from you, because I know my kryptonite is trying to get people out the door and us not being able to find stuff. Or, like, you know, people taking too long to, you know, like they've lost their hat or they've dropped this. And what that does, it just takes it all away. The school cupboard is always replenished with school socks. There's always a clean uniform in there. The children know, although they have to be reminded. The moment they get home from school, they unpack their lunchbox and they put their bag and shoes away. So I'm not constantly tripping over bags and shoes. I'm not going to find a lunchbox that hasn't been emptied and cleaned. And it's like the most simplest thing that we can teach our children as an aspect of self-responsibility that alleviates our resentment and supports them to ensure that they're, you know, being responsible in the home. Because this is the other challenge that we get into if we feel like it's all on us, is that we overfunction and support our children and our partners underfunctioning.
100%.
And that is not good for them. It's not, and it's also not good for the way we continue to perpetuate narratives around the super mum and the woman who does it all and the woman who is, you know, like just kicking all these goals basically because everyone's getting a free ride.
Yeah, no, and I as I said, I learned that the hard way in having the mum that overfunctioned for everybody else. Like, I learned a lot, but also I think it capped me to a point because I just relied on her to be there and to be kind of doing it. And then I guess that was the hardest lesson of all. Like, when she died, I didn't know where she ended and I started. Like, we were so close and so intertwined and I like codependent almost, that I didn't even know what life was like. And then I had to learn to live and function in a home that wasn't like, it was mine, but it wasn't my dynamic as such, without someone there then to support me. So I also have to check myself with my kids, because it's easier for me to do it for them. So I'm very intentional, and that's why, like, we look at certain areas like having the school station and like having homes for things, so that it's just getting them, it's that repetition. So I'm finding with the children too, like the more you repeat that, the easier it is. And it's just that, I guess, true working backwards. So anywhere in your days that you're finding, like, if it's getting out the door in the mornings, or it's like that bedtime, running to bedtime, so like getting home from school, getting the homework, getting the readers, all that, getting them into bath and into bed, I'm watching myself and always being like, if I'm feeling resentful, then something of mine is not, like, my needs here aren't being met. And that might be because it's not flowing in a way that's working for me. And if it's not working for me, well, then I'm resentful of everyone else. Even if I'm not, my energy's no good. And then that's just fueling that dynamic. So it's just, I guess, taking check and like stock and really looking at, what does everyone need here? What can I do to help my future self? Like, I talk about my future self. What can I do today? So I start on the front foot. So my spaces and things are closed the night before. I start my day afresh on the front foot, because I know for me, the biggest trip for me is if I feel like I've started on the back foot, it's hard to get out of my head for the rest of the day. Like, I just live in my head, rather than being like, if I set this up, I have processes and structures in place, right? So that masculine sort of structure, then I can flow, like that feminine flow within that, because I know, like, everyone kind of knows what's expected, and it won't work every time. Like, there'll always be days where things come in and throw it off, but there'll be more good days than harder.
I'm smiling because I'm seeing the beauty of that masculine, because I cook dinner every night and sometimes I'll get the dishwasher on afterwards, sometimes I won't. But my husband, before he goes to work every morning, he washes all the dishes, and he has in his head, and he says it because I want you to have a start from fresh, like, for the day. And like and I don't always appreciate it like that, but you're right, because it means that I know that whatever I've got planned for my day, I'm going to be starting it with clean kitchen.
Yeah, and that makes the biggest difference. Like this morning, because my husband, like, we're opposite, so I'm a lark and he's a night owl. So everything, like, dinner will all be cleaned up, everything will be in the dishwasher will run, and he will empty that before he goes to bed, because I go to bed much earlier than him. And then this morning, it's interesting you say that. So I went down, and then so all the lunch boxes would be in that dishwasher from the night before, and normally they're just in the drying station, like if they're like they haven't dried off. But I then, if I on occasion have to do that myself, I will then lie everything out so it's already on the bench, so the space is set up, like, not overly, but it's enough for, like, one less thing that my brain has to think about. Anyway, this morning I got up and I walked into the kitchen, and he'd set it all up. Like, he's watched me enough to know what I do. He'd refilled the drink, like, just that little bit of refilled and I just said to him, and that's a massive part of it too. Like, thank you. Like, that 5 minutes that you took to do that serves all of us, because then I feel like I'm being seen and valued. And most of the time we'd be like, oh, we just expect that he would do that. Well, no, because unless, like, you've had those conversations, we can't be expecting other people to read our minds. Like, I know that you guys talk a lot about that, and I was like, oh, that's like you don't need to thank me. And I'm like, no, thank you, because that gets me off on the, like. And then this morning, just, I don't know, and I felt appreciated.
It's a form of, I think it's a form of holding, and because we do as mothers so much holding for everybody else, just those little gestures that feel like we're being held in our, overwhelm is really, really, like, powerful. It just feels like an extra breath that you can get in your body.
100%. And so much of what I see in the home is that, like, regardless of anything else, that women and mothers just want to be seen. Want to be seen, heard, and valued for this invisible load that we're carrying, and for all the work and the time that society doesn't have. Like, society just unfortunately doesn't value that.
Somehow children just get raised and houses just get clean and people just thrive. It just happens somehow. Don't know.
I know. So not only do we set ourselves up to fail because we don't really put any structures, and, like, we don't teach the generations how to actually do that, and then, like, there's no, but, like, we set ourselves up to hit resentment and overwhelm, and then it's almost like become accepted that we then complain about it. But we should just complain, because you're not, if you're not complaining, then you're not doing it right. Like, you should be then, I don't know, complaining about it.
That also keeps us really stuck, because it's, you know how that saying, misery loves company. So does disempowerment, right? Disempowerment loves company. Like, I will feel a little less shit about how shit I feel if you feel shit too. Which is not, like, lifting anybody up. Like, it might meet you might feel met in that, but we also don't change narratives if we simply just, a little bit like last week's episode when Julie and I were talking about, her prolapse and just the way we treat women's health. Because as long as women suffer in silence, as long as women go back to the oppressive obstetrician because somehow we should trust them, then we continue to perpetuate the same systems. And that's what's happening in our homes. It's what's happening when we don't have the conversations about what we need. It's what's happening when we slip back into our imprint and reinforce gender roles. without like meeting in the middle and going, what would you love to take care of, and what would I love to take care of, and how can this feel good for both of us? Those are the conversations that we need to have. But if we get to hide too much in what we do, even if we resent it, because we're choosing the devil that we know rather than the one that we don't, then we're still staying disempowered.
100%. And I think too, we just have this mentality to just survive, like this survival mentality. And I guess I have obviously not a great ending. Like I've seen the result of that sort of just, let's just survive, let's just keep going, let's keep pushing, let's keep going. Like, didn't serve my mother. So I don't want to, like, in those early years for motherhood were really hard. Like, I had postnatal depression. Like, I hit every kind of personal edge I could almost have hit. And that just made me realize that I want to thrive. Like, I want to show my children how this can be different. And I want the generations that come after me. Like, so I value something that a lot of people don't value, but it may, I don't know, like, if you're feeling good, like, how much better is your life? And as women, like, we're the leaders. Like, I feel like we're sailing the ships. Like, what kind of ships do we want to be sailing? Like, just a ship that we're always like, that's got lots of holes and that we're constantly plugging the holes? Or do we want to build that kind of ship that can hold us and protect us and nurture us, and like, and it's not going to be perfect, but whatever that means for you, like, I don't know, like, as women, can we stand up and be saying, yeah, it's important that I have a voice, and it's important that I have needs, and it's not in place of anyone else's. It's not, I'm doing this like, it's complementary to all of us. Like, we're all working together as a whole to make the experience for everyone better, rather than all coming into the home with individual needs and then like trying to project them onto each other and then just hitting up against each other over and over again. Like, can we find a happy medium, like just a better way? But yeah, I'm not here to survive. Like, and you taught me that, like, nourishing the mother, like, just even that concept to me after seeing what my mother went through, I just was like, wow. And I remember one of my mum's friends saying to me, Tara, this is your chance to do it your way. I love your mum, but it's your chance to do it your way. And I was like, okay, so, but I don't know what that is. So until you get to know who you are, it's hard to know. And it's just a play. Like, I say to people all the time, like, we've lost that ability to play. But if I'm hitting something in my home, I turn to my 5-year-old who doesn't have all that layering that I have. And I'll say, and she's very creative and a problem solver. And I'll say, right, how would you do that? Or I say to my son, how would you do that? What would your experience of that be? And then I'll just think to myself, wow, like, I just would never have come to, like, I'm so layered and conditioned. So the more I've got to know myself and I've unpacked my imprint, the more of that layering's moved away. And when that layering moves away, I think, well, like, you peel back, it never ends. But the better you get to see yourself, the more you understand why you're doing and behaving the way that you are. And then you can work with it rather than constantly. I spent my life hitting up against my nervous system, like, fix it. I want it to be different. Why is it not different? Instead of saying, well, there's a reason why it's this. It's been a gift. It's given me this. I'm going to embrace it and I'm going to work with it. So let's all work together as women and hold each other up. And, yeah, just do it your way and do it in a way that breathes life into you and to everyone else, not you doing it in a way that breathes life only into everyone around you, because everyone around you is better when you're at your best, like when you're showing up as the best version of you. But in saying that, like, that's a lifelong lesson for me. Like, I have to constantly be checking myself, because when things speed up and times get hard, my autopilot masculine, keep pushing, keep doing, even if you're sick, like, go and go and go. And literally, like, I would only ever rest when my body stopped, like, until my asthma got really bad, till I got really unwell. So it's just that constant checking. And even it just starts with a checking in with self every day. What's feeling good? What's not feeling good? What's one small thing? Like, is it a warm cup of tea when I first get up in the morning? I don't know. Like, there's a lot of power for me in that. It's just a really simple act. But the first thing I do when I come downstairs is I put the kettle on the stove, and it whistles, and it's almost like that whistling of the pot on the stove is like the start of the day, and I have it, and it's like a nourishing warmth into my body. And then I take some time outside and I do a bit of writing, and then I'm ready to take on what everyone else throws at me. But if I'm not, and then until that builds up, so I might not do that every single day, but if I find for a week I haven't done it, like that resentment is just, it's just being like, this is just feedback. This is my body saying a need is not being met in my home. How can I address that? Well, that's how I
love it.
A lot of people don't see it that way, but that.
No, but I mean, I think, like it aligns so much with, mine and Julie's work and just what Nourishing Mother is all about, is that, how can I both listen to myself more and value my voice, and also ask for what I need around me, and be willing to push back against narratives that perhaps have kept, other entrenched systems quite comfortable but haven't empowered me or my family or where we want to go.
That's right.
So you are coming into reimagining motherhood in this next week, and can you share a little bit, I guess, about what you are planning to do in there, and then also how people can work directly with you?
Yes, I will. So I'll come in and I will be talking a lot about, I guess, the nervous system and quieting down our spaces, and I guess to creating space and time for us. So the practical applications of a lot of what we talked about, there's quite a lot of sort of common first steps that I like to take clients through to just get them thinking about things quite differently, whether that's that they create a list or a couple of starting points, like I said, with a cup of tea and things like that. So just starting to think about some processes and some practical applications to then build in whilst you're sort of watching and observing what's happening in your spaces. And then also teaching people, like working through and helping them sit with themselves in their spaces, and a bit too of unpacking of I like to look at different kind of rooms of the house and how that relates to different areas of life and what that's kind of communicating to you. And you gave me some more food for thought when we were talking about schools. I guess it's that structuring of kind of working backwards, being like, I've got this much time, this is what the expectations are. So how can I bring in that kind of that masculine sort of holding pattern that'll get me to where I need to be, that's a happy medium for everyone. So it's not like I'm sitting there barking orders all the time. Like everyone kind of knows what's expected. And as I said, the more of that soft kind of structure and routine that you build in, the easier it becomes, because our brains love repetition. So particularly and the smaller your children are, because obviously they're always watching us. Like they're also listening to what we're saying, but they're watching what we're doing and how we're interacting in our environment. So a lot of like thinking about what you're wanting to be teaching them, and then role modeling it in a way that fuels their values and gets everyone's needs kind of met. So a lot more of sort of the practical applications and working with the women to answer like sort of any questions, and looking at certain areas. Like there are definitely some certain areas in the home that are the real sort of bugbears, like that I see a lot of, like that most of us are hitting.
And I mean, even sometimes the simplest things, like my kids will often say, can you get me a glass? And it's because we've had our glasses up where they can't reach. And I've been meaning to change it for so long. I finally did the other day. And then it's just like that irritation of that constant interruption when I'm doing something else, or my husband's doing something else, to be asked for a glass is gone away, because we've actually met our child where they are and have made it something that they can help themselves with, which is very much a Montessori kind of principle. But I think sometimes we can miss all of the ways where we could be making it easier on ourselves because we're just not really looking at it. And so I love that you're going to be taking us through some practical stuff in there.
Yeah, as I said, it starts with just getting curious and just observing yourself. Like, just watch. And then too, if you really want a really good idea, go to your mum's house. Like, spend half a day with your mum and watch her or your dad in her space as well. And then start looking at, instead of looking at sort of with your perspective as a sort of an outsider, and be just like, oh, so I do a lot of that. Like, do you know what I mean?
That's interesting. I'll do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Or if they're staying with you, like, you may not live in the same state, and then just starting to notice what your edges are, like what you're constantly hitting up against, like you were saying with the glass. Like, set yourself up for success. Like, and it's just a little like that, doing something like that, changing where the glass is, like, it seems inconsequential, but those changes build up to making a huge difference. Like I always say, the smallest changes make the biggest impact. And the time that you invest in your space is, I guarantee you get back 10 or 20 fold, because when, like, and I'm probably getting to the bottom of a lot of the stuff in our home, but the less sort of items and things and processes and caring for and things that you need to do, the more time and freedom you have. Like, we're societally conditioned to collect more, but in actual fact, that's so much more responsibility.
Yeah, like everything that comes in your home, you've got to do something with. Like, you're responsible for.
Yeah, so it's also, it's just becoming, as I said, an observer in your own home, like just taking that one step back and just having a pad and just noticing what are the things that are just constantly coming up. Like, what am I thinking? What, and then say to myself, like, oh, I'm noticing that coming up. Do I actually believe that? Probably not even mine. Yeah. Is it working for me? Kind of. Is it not? Is it working for my kids? Is it like, yeah.
Such good questions to ask. Now, if somebody wants to find out more about your work specifically, where can they find you?
They can find me as the Household Advisor. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, but Instagram is kind of where I am most of the time. Like, that's I love it there. So I put all my sort of, I guess, tips and tricks and advice there. I also have a website, so www.thehouseholdadvisor.com. I have 7 workbooks on there. I also have an ebook and a guide, lots of free resources, and you can work one-on-one with me, as well as a couple of options there. And I work with people all over the world, so I can work with you virtually, or if you're in the southeast in Melbourne where I am, I also am open to coming in to your spaces and working with you there one-on-one.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Tara. I so appreciate your wisdom and your reflections. And it's opened up a lot for me. So hopefully it's opened up some more for our listeners too.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and to find out more about what I have on offer, head to bridgetwood.life, and for all things in Julie's world, go to julietanner.love. You can find us together at nourishingmother.com.au. Remember to nourish someone to rock the family, and we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey. Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietanner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.